Right, so let's move with application layer protocols. And there are various application layer protocols which is we are having in our GATE syllabus. But the first one that we are going to explore is HTTP, that is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. That is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And application layer is topmost layer of OSI model, right? So let's discover the properties of HTTP. The first important property of HTTP protocol is it is a client server protocol. It is a client server protocol, right? So what do we mean by client server protocol? It's just like, let's say this is a client and let's say this is a server. So let's say it may be any Google server, you can assume. Let's say it is a Google server. So if client will send any request, let's say client has searched for a query HTTPS, whatever HTTP and www.google.com, then a request will be sent to the server and connection will be established, and thereafter that particular query will be resolved by reply. So first HTTP request message will be gone, and thereafter after establishing the connection, as it is a connection oriented protocol, so server will reply. So it would be treated as a HTTP reply. But before HTTP reply, it would be HTTP request. And google.com, basically it is a URL, that is uniform resource locator, which we are going to search from our browser, and it will give the resultant query using the protocol which is called as HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And the port number that is uses, the port number that's going to be used under HTTP, under application layer protocol, is port number 80. Port number 80 is reserved for all the activities done by HTTP. So the first part is that, first property of HTTP is that it is a client server protocol. The second one is it is a synchronous protocol. It is a synchronous protocol. So what we mean by synchronous, we can write it because while using HTTP protocol, both the clocks, that is senders and receivers, should be synchronized. That is why we say that HTTP is a synchronous protocol. Then if we talk about the third property, then third property we can have in terms of HTTP connections. HTTP connections. So basically, if I talk, there are normally two type of HTTP connections. First one is HTTP, which is persistent, or you can say that persistent HTTP connection. Persistent HTTP connection. And the second one is non-persistent HTTP connection. Non-persistent HTTP connection. Non-persistent HTTP connections. So there are basically two types of HTTP connections: persistent HTTP and non-persistent HTTP. Right. So what is HTTP persistent and non-persistent? We can explore it like, if we talk about persistent HTTP, then in persistent HTTP, let's say it is a client and let's say it is a server. So if any particular request will be sent, so if any particular request will be sent via client by client, then it would be treated as a HTTP request, and for every request server will give the reply in the form of HTTP reply, right? Again, if next object that we want to ask, that we want to query, it would be given to the server in the form of HTTP request, and again the server will send HTTP reply. So basically each packet will be sended, each packet's query will be sended, and we are going to get the reply. So let's say here we got our first object, here we got our second object, and before that we must need to establish the connection between client and server, which is three phase uh, process, that is connection oriented. That is, first connection will be established, the data will be transferred, and thereafter connection will be terminated. So if we are getting object by object, packet by packet, this is called as persistent HTTP. And I if derive non-persistent HTTP, then in non-persistent HTTP, basically let's say it is a client and let's say it is a server. So between client and server, let's say the thing is that HTTP request will be sent, and thereafter HTTP reply will be getted, right? And after HTTP request and HTTP reply, the first HTTP request will be made, via which we will get the HTTP reply. It means that first connection will be established. Let's say we got our first object, and just after getting the first object, connection will be terminated. So we again need to establish the connection here. So here connection established, but after getting first object, connection will be terminated. So we again need to make connection. We again need to establish the connection. So connection establishment will be there, and after connection establishment, we can send the request for second object, and second objects will be taken as a HTTP reply. So let's say this is second object. So basically in non-persistent HTTP, after each object, connection will be terminated, and we again need to set up the connection between client and server. So basically here security is more. Here we can say that security feature is there, and due to this security feature we can say that this is highly secure, because after each object we are again establishing the connection. But if we talk about persistent, so in persistent it is not like so. It means that after every process there is no need to terminate the connection. Only once connection is established, we can send one packet by packet without terminating the one in persistent. But in non-persistent, every time after getting the packet, after getting the objects, we need to establish the connection, right? So if you want to take a note on persistent and non-persistent, we can take it like, in persistent HTTP, in persistent HTTP, connection will only be until connection will connection will be there until all the objects are accessed, until all the objects are accessed, right? So this is for user friendly requirement. This is for user friendly requirement, whereas in non persistent, whereas in non-persistent HTTP connection. Every individual object will have a separate connection establishment. Every individual object need to establish a separate connection. Getting it? Every individual object need to establish a separate connection in non-persistent HTTP. This is for security requirement. This is for security requirement. Getting it? So basically, we can say that this is basically difference between persistent and non-persistent, right? Now, let's discuss about some important HTTP APIs, which is very important part here, right? That HTTP API is application programming interface. API means application programming interface. So basically, if we are having, let's say, client, and if we are having, let's say, server, so between client and server, if a connection is got established, there in that HTTP connection, HTTP protocol will have some API. It will have some get, will have some post, will have put, and we may have here head, connect, or we can say that one more is trace. So let's discuss get, post, put, connect, and trace one by one, right? So if we talk about get method in HTTP, if we talk about get method in HTTP, it is used to retrieve the document. It is used to retrieve the documents, right? To retrieve the documents, get method is used. If we talk about post method, if we talk about post method, then it is used to send back, it is used to send back, the modified document to the server. The modified document to the server, right? If we talk about put, then put method basically used to modify the content of document. It is used for modifying the content of document. And if I talk about connect method, then connect method is used so that data will go via a secure channel for sending data via a secure channel. A secure channel. We use connect method, and that too in encrypted form. Sending data via secure channel, and that too in encrypted format. In encrypted format. That is why connect method is used under HTTP, and then we are having trace. So trace method in HTTP basically it is used for debugging the network, for debugging the network, or analyzing the network, or analyzing the network, right? For debugging the network or for analyzing the network, we use trace method. So basically they are very important APIs under HTTP protocol. Now let's write some important points. That is, HTTP is a stateless protocol. HTTP is a stateless protocol. So basically there are two kind of protocols. One is called as stateless and another one is called stateful. So basically, what do you mean by stateless protocol? By default, HTTP is a stateless protocol because it doesn't store any information. It means that it doesn't store, it does not store any, it does not store any information. It does not store any information about the server in the client browser, about the server in client browser, right? It does not store any information about the server in client browser once the connection get closed. That is why it is called as stateless protocol. Now, the next point that we should have to write here, one thing called as a cookie, COOKIE. So it is a piece of code. What cookie is? It is a piece of code that is transmitted from server, that is transmitted from server. Why it is transmitted from server? Right? Why it is transmitted from server? For immediating, for immediate, right? For speeding purpose. So cookie can be used in browser so that any piece of code can be transmitted immediately from any particular agency, or it may have at the client browser, so that speed whatever thing that we want to search again and again and again, that can be speedily available to the client. Now, the advantages of cookies are, if we talk about the advantages of using cookies, it is because of faster response. It is because of faster response from server side, as well as for authorization, as well as for authorization. These are two advantages of cookie, right? Now, we can conclude the HTTP protocol. We can conclude the HTTP protocol using a line in which I can write HTTP is in-band protocol, it is stateless protocol, it is stateless protocol, it is in-band protocol, and it uses TCP, in transport layer, right? Very important point. Many times it is asked in gate exam and other exams as a conceptual question. HTTP is an in-band protocol, it is a stateless protocol, and it uses TCP, that is transmission control protocol, in transport layer, right? So very important point I have written here. So I hope that whatever information we have discussed about HTTP in this section is very much clear, correct? So okay, now let's discuss the next protocol of application layer, that is FTP.